we will take questions for clarity, but keep it short, simple, and very brief. Remember, no ambiguity, no long stories, no historical antecedents. All of us know where we're coming from. And I hope all of us know where we should be going to. But just in case you don't know where you should be going to, this forum will provide clarity on all of that and much more. Please, for those who are so far off, you're so far off, you're so far off. Permit me say, draw nearer, please, come down. Let the latecomers, the chronic latecomers, meet themselves behind. Because if we were sharing blessings or palliatives, you would be in front. So come forward. We want to see you. Come forward. Madam in green, come forward. We still have room. Come forward. Just leave the front row only. From the second row, please occupy. You would see that our host has been here seated and ready to welcome all of us on site and online. And seated here is the director, is the permanent secretary of finance, Mr. Aliyu Ahmed. Mr. Aliyu Ahmed is so COVID-19 compliant with his face mask. Please, a round of applause for him. Also here is our very time-conscious, forward-looking, and the one who hopes the nation takes the plans put in place and we implement. Our host for today, the Director General of the Budget Office of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, Mr. Ben Akabwezi. And also beside him, because a country that knows how much you're managing in debt would know the income, expenditure, and how to fit in all the logistics, is the Director General Debt Management Office of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, Mrs. Patience Oniha. As all our key focal persons on the table of responsibility come forward, we shall be recognizing them. But for now, permit me crave your indulgence that we all rise to pay allegiance to the green passport, the country of our birth, the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Okay, we shall wait for our minister to arrive. But before then, ask your neighbor, I hope you came with your thinking cap. Just ask your neighbor, did you come with your thinking cap? Do you have your inputs ready? I hope you are building Nigeria from where you are. Also in our midst, permit me recognize the presence of the Acting Accountant General of the Federation, Mr. Silva Okoliabo. Mr. Silva Okoliabo. Sir, could you wave so that they can identify you and ask questions? Thank you so very much. Please note the names so that in case you're asking questions, direct it straight to whom you're sending to. We don't want you moving MMM. Time is of the essence. Now, why do we have to have a medium-term fiscal framework? Every expenditure has a subhead. For everyone who goes to the markets now, all of us go with our list. And no matter how expensive the increment is, we stick to the list because it is the money that you have that you can spend. And you can only spend the money that you have budgeted for. So that's why we have to sit down here and ask everybody, how do we get this sector right? What do you think about this other sector? What do you think it should be? And for all of us who are so ignorant and you don't know the stages of getting to the final budget, you will learn, but you will make inputs too, because Nigeria belongs to all of us. And I know some of us, we're always saying, Oh, our money, our money. It's now time to plan for our money from 2023 to 2025. Please, could we give a round of applause to the Director General and the staff of the Budget Office of the Federation, because it only takes a leader forward thinking to do this. You're not clapping well. Even if you got hit by the rain before coming here, please give him a befitting round of applause. Meanwhile, all of you are looking so beautiful. I love the greens, Nigeria on your mind. I love the reds, the blood flowing in our veins, and knowing that we're Nigerian, because when you bleed, all of us bleed red. I love the blacks. It reminds us that the soil is still fertile. So when you're building 24 rooms for 2 people, remember you could have farmed on half of the land. The land is green, the people are vibrant, the nation awaits our inputs. Nigeria cannot grow without the collective input from you and I and from all of us. From the market woman who's complaining that things are so expensive, to the driver who's thinking about fuel, to the people in the banks who are saying, oh, people no longer come to the banks because there's no money. But how do we plan for what we have? Well, in the course of this today, we shall bring that. At this point in time, please permit me announce the arrival of the Honorable Minister of Finance, Dr. Mrs. Zainab Shamsuddin Ahmed. Shall we all rise? Dr. Mrs. Zainab Shamsuddin Ahmed, and also the Minister of State, Prince Clem Abba. Please, a round of applause to them. And now that we're all standing, shall we pay allegiance to Nigeria with the national anthem? Shall we recite the second stanza of the national anthem as our opening prayer? 1, 2, 3, go. O God of creation, direct our noble course, guide our leaders right, help our youth the truth to know, in love and honesty to grow, and living just and true. Great lofty heights attain to build a nation where peace and justice reign. And we all shall say, amen. Please have your seats. Once again, please welcome to the Public Consultative Forum on the 2023 to 2025 medium-term fiscal framework. It is organized by the Budget Office of the Federation under the Federal Minister of Finance, Budgets and National Planning. I have already made some key recognitions, but please permit me once again, in the interest of those who have defied the rains in some parts of Abuja and made it down here, who may want to ask questions, keep it short, simple, and very straight to the point, and be sure you know who you're directing the question to. And for our online participants virtually, we look forward to your questions. Inbox, go to the chat room, go straight to the point. Do not write too much stories because we might miss your question in the course of the story. Once again, permit me recognize in our midst the presence of the Honorable Minister of Finance, Mrs. Dr. Zainab Shamsuna Ahmed. Please, a round of applause. Also next to her is the Honorable Minister of State, Prince Clem Agba. We also have here in our midst the Permanent Secretary, Finance, Mr. Aliyu Ahmed. We also have here in our midst our host, the Director General of the Budget Office, Mr. Ben Akabweze. We also have in our midst the Director General, Debt Management Office, Mrs. Patience Oniha. Permit me also to recognize in our midst the presence of the Acting Accountant General of the Federation, Mr. Silva Okoliabo. Permit me to recognize and bring over to the table of responsibility the Director General, Nigerian Institute of Social and Economic Research, NISA, Professor Simbine. Please, could we clap until she makes it over here? For all our online participants, remember the participation through your questions, through your inputs is very important. We shall be looking into our chat box to take your questions as it arises. Without further talks and much ado, please permit me to invite to the microphone the Director General of the Budget Office of the Federation, Mr. Ben Akabweze, for a welcome remark. Please, a round of applause.
The Honorable Minister of Finance, Budget and National Planning, Mrs. Dr. Zainab Shamsuna Ahmed, Honorable Minister of State, Budget and National Planning, Prince Clem Agba, Permanent Secretary, Minister of Finance, Director General, Debt Management Office, Director General, Nigerian Institute of Social and Economic Research, Acting Accountant General of the Federation, other senior officials of government, invited guests, gentlemen of the press, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, and including very particularly our online audience that is significantly larger than the in-person audience here. It is once again my pleasure to welcome you all to the Public Consultative Forum on the 2023 to 2025 medium-term fiscal framework. Today's event is being held on a hybrid basis, i.e. both physically and virtually, so that as many people as desire to participate will be able to do so. Apart from being a requirement of the Fiscal Responsibility Act 2007, this event and our approach to it reflect our commitment to transparency and accountability in public financial management, PFM. The recently released Open Budget Index report by the International Budget Partnership, IBP, bears eloquent testimony to the progress the federal government, Nigeria, has made in improving transparency and accountability in PFM. Nigeria posted its best performance in the Open Budget Survey, improving by 24 points for transparency in the latest OBI report. The total transparency score Nigeria of 45 in the 2021 survey is a significant leap from the 21 scored in 2019 and even lower scores in prior periods. And this performance is the second highest improvement worldwide in the 2021 survey. As you will hear shortly, when the Honorable Minister of Finance, Budget and National Planning makes her presentation, our country is going through significant fiscal challenges. And so this forum is really what it is called, a consultative forum. It is our hope, it's our expectation that when the time comes, you will engage in providing solutions, suggestions about what we could do, or what we could do better, or what we could do more in addressing these challenges, rather than, as you will see, the challenges are well understood and well articulated. But of course, if you really think that we have misdiagnosed the problem, we will be quite happy also to hear your own perspective to this. But the point that I'm making is, let this not be a session of simply recounting, wailing over the challenges, but one that is intended to improve our own thinking in terms of how to address these well-known challenges. And therefore, without further, it is once again my pleasure to welcome you all to this event, and we look forward to a very rewarding time here, a very interactive session. We also need to be time efficient, especially given that we have a significant online audience, and therefore we may not be able to stay online for too long. So please bear with us. We'll try and be very efficient in time management. Thank you, and God bless the Federal Republic of Nigeria.
I think your hands should do better than that. Without a further waste of time, because data is life, and the financial implications of expending time on data is quite huge to the economy of various people. Permit me welcome the Honorable Minister of Finance, Budget and National Planning, Dr. Mrs. Zainab Ahmed, to step forward for the presentation of the draft of the 2023 to 2025 MTFF and the FSP. Please, a round of applause to her.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Special recognition to the Honorable Minister of State Budget and National Planning, the PAMSEC Finance, DG Budget of the Federation, DG Debt Management Office, DG NISA, and the Director overseeing the Office of the Accountant General of the Federation, as of agencies and representatives of ministries, departments, and agencies, development partners, captains of industry, our brothers and sisters from the media, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. My task today is to present to you our thinking of what our medium-term expenditure framework should look like. This is a consultative session. We have scheduled a series of consultations. We'll also be consulting with the governors. We'll be consulting with leadership from the National Assembly. So this is an input-taking session. And everything that is here is a draft. So we really do look forward to receiving valuable inputs from members of the public today. My presentation has an outline, and I'll try to do this as efficient as possible to give more time for discussions. There will be an overview. In addition to an introduction, there will be an overview of our 2022 fiscal outcomes, how we have performed so far, so just reporting, and then an update on the performance of the 2022 budget. Then we will present the key assumptions and macroeconomic framework that we're proposing for 2023 to 2025. Then we'll show you an overview of that framework following the assumptions that we made. And then we'll close out on the meeting. So, ladies and gentlemen, this draft 2023 to 2025 MTEP has been prepared against a backdrop of the continuing global and domestic challenges in the aftermath of the COVID-19 pandemic. Factors that impact the medium-term fiscal outlook include the Russia-Ukraine war, which has assumed a new and very worrisome dimension with severe implications on food and energy prices globally. The resurgence of COVID-19 pandemic in some major economies, which has led to a slowdown of activities in those economies. The renewed and elevated inflation in most countries, prompting monetary tightening in these economies with the inherent negative impact on capital inflow to emerging economies like Nigeria. Also, of course, we have the challenges of domestic macro and business environment and the negative impact of security on our domestic economy. The Nigerian economy sustained its recovery from recession for the fifth consecutive quarter, going from 3.11% in real terms in the first quarter of 2022. Most sectors recorded positive growth. The broad-based growth reflects the effective implementation of the economic sustainability measures undertaken by the Buhari administration. Like many other economies, our economy faces lingering COVID-19 pandemic effects, as well as higher global food and fuel prices due to the Ukraine-Russia war. The IMF projects global growth to slow down from an estimated 6.1% in 2021 to 3.6% in 2022 and 2023. Nigeria continues to be exposed to risk aversion in the global capital market, which will put further pressures on the foreign exchange market as foreign portfolio investors are yet to return to the Nigerian market. The Central Bank of Nigeria expects the renewed pressure on the foreign exchange market and accompanying naira depreciation to subside from the third quarter of this year. An overview of the 2022 fiscal outcomes and an update on the 2022 Federation revenue performance. So the performance of the 2022 budget parameters, including oil production, which was set at 1.6 million barrels per day in the amended budget, if you recall. The actual performance, and this is as at April 2022, is 1.32 million barrels per day. We understand that there is an uptick to 1.4 million barrels per day as at May, but my report is as at April. The oil price, on the other hand, which was fixed in the budget at $73 per barrel, is an average of 103.6 million, sorry, 103.6 dollars per barrel. So that is an improvement over what we projected. But note that the production is very low. The exchange rate, on the other hand, that was fixed at 410 naira 15 kobo, is now 415.1 naira to the US dollar. Inflation, which we had projected initially at 13%, and we have had to revise it upwards to 16.11% in the amended budget, is now up to 17.71% and has gone higher also in the last month inflation that was released last week to 18.4%. GDP growth, which we had forecasted in the adjusted forecast of 3.55%, is looking at is now at an average of 3.11%. And again, this is as of April. The performance of the budget parameters indicates that the actual crude oil price is higher than the budget benchmark of $73 per barrel. However, high oil prices are offset by the lower output, which as at April stands at 1.32 million barrels per day. NNPC attributes the fall in oil production to the high incidence of crude theft and pipeline vandalization. Exchange rate and inflation and GDP growth varied variously according to the vis-a-vis the targets as presented in the previous slide. Growth is, however, expected to accelerate given efforts to contain structural issues impacting adversely on the cost of doing business. An overview of the oil revenue performance for 2022, and again, this is up to April. The gross oil and gas federation revenues for full year 2022 was projected at 9.37 trillion naira for the whole year 2022. But as at April, only 1.23 trillion was realized out of the prorated portion of 3.12 trillion as at April 2022, representing a mere 39% of the performance against the target. Despite higher oil prices, oil revenue underperformed due significantly to oil production shortfalls for two main reasons. One, oil production shut-ins resulting from pipeline vandalization and crude oil theft, and two, high petroleum subsidy cost due to higher landing costs of imported products into Nigeria. Non-oil taxes trailed targets marginally with a performance of 92.6%. This means that the revenue that has accrued so far is largely from non-oil sources. Revenue performance is expected to improve in the second half of 2022 as a result of concerted efforts to address oil theft and pipeline vandalization. There's also the seasonality of some of the non-oil taxes, which means that we expect to collect significantly more in the second half of the year. For example, company income tax payments normally fall due from the second quarter, the third quarter of any particular year. So we expect more of the non-oil taxes to accrue in the second half of the year. This improved revenue collection should also moderate the debt service to revenue ratio, which is currently above our target level. So the table at slide 11 shows the summary that I have just indicated, and because I'm having difficulty seeing the figures, I will just leave it for you to see it when we post it on the website. The overview of the Federation fiscal outcomes also includes the federal and VAT pool accounts distribution. So the amount available for distribution from the main pool of the Federation account from the VAT source is 1.52 trillion. Of this amount, the federal government received 802.5 billion, while the states and the local governments received 407.04 billion and 313.81 billion respectively. The federal, state, and local governments received 107.67 billion, 358.90 billion, and 251.23 billion respectively from the VAT pool. Again, the table under this is just putting the numbers as I have just summarized. Let me move now to an update on the 2022 federal government budget as at January to April. As at April 2022, federal government's retained revenue was only 1.63 trillion. That is 49% of the prorated target of 3.32 trillion. The federal share of oil reserves of oil revenue, I beg your pardon, was 285.38 billion, representing 39% performance, while non-oil taxes revenue totaling 632.56 billion represents a performance of 84%. With CIT and VAT collections posting 298.83 billion and 102.97 billion, representing 99% and 98% respectively. Customs collection, made up of import duties, excise and fees, as well as Federation account special levies, trailed target by 76.77%, which is equivalent to 25.42%. Other revenues amounting to 66.64 billion, of which independent revenue is 394.09 billion, is also below target. The aggregate expenditure for the 2022 budget was 17.32 billion. That's the size of the 2022 budget, with a prorated spending of 5.77 trillion, 4 months, January to April 2022. The actual spending as at 31st of April 2022 was 4.72 trillion. Of this amount, 1.94 trillion was for debt service, 1.26 trillion was for personnel costs, including pensions, and as at April, 773.63 billion has been spent on capital expenditure. The total performance of the capital of the aggregate expenditure is almost 80%. So let's move now to the key assumptions and the macro framework for the 2023 to 2025 medium-term fiscal framework. The key parameters, as well as other macroeconomic projections driving the medium-term revenue and expenditure framework, have been revised in line with emerging realities. The new figures are represented in this table that is on the screen. And let me just post a note to say that the initial projection looks like it's not likely to be achieved based on current trends. The medium-term projections also that we present here deviate from the National Development Plan of 2021 to 2025 for the same 3 years. This we have had to update based on a combination of current realities and a modified medium-term outlook. For instance, inflation and growth in the National Development Plan are projected at 14.93% and 4.39%. And you will see that this has been adjusted in this outlook. So the oil price benchmark for 2023 is projected to be $70 per barrel and $66.62 for the outer years of 2024 and 2025. Oil production is projected to be 1.69 million barrels per day, and we expect an uptick in 2024 to 2025 of 1.83 to 1.83 million barrels per day. Exchange rates is expected to go up, with the Naira depreciating marginally from 410 Naira 15 kobo to 435 Naira and 57 kobo for the 3-year reporting period. Inflation, on the other hand, is projected to be 17.16% average for 2023, 16.21% for 2024, and 17.21% for 2025. The non-oil GDP is projected to be 214 trillion, up from 188 trillion, while in the outer years, it's expected to move up to 239 trillion and 269 trillion respectively. The GDP growth is projected to be 3.75%, up from 3.55% of 2022. This is in 2023, 3.75%, and we project a dip in 2024 to 3.3%, and then a slight uptick in 2025 to 3.46%. The nominal consumption, on the other hand, is remaining almost relatively flat from 120 trillion in 2022 to 121 in 2023, and then to 123 in 2024 and 125 in 2025. So the key assumptions that we made, just the basis for the medium-term projections, I've said earlier on, deviate from the National Development Plan, and this we had to do to bring the projections in the National Development to current realities. In the MTEP, real GDP growth is projected to be 3.75% in 2023, and it will go up to 3.5% 3.30%, go down to 3.30% in 2024. The inflation rate is projected to be 17.16% year-end average for 2023, and it will go up to 16.1% in, that is having gone up from an average of 16.11% for 2023. The upward pressure on prices is expected to be driven from the current lag effect of the global price surge due to the Russia-Ukraine war, and also due to the domestic insecurity, due to the rising cost of import, and also exchange rate depreciation, as well as other supply side effects. Growth in nominal GDP consumption has been adjusted in line also with current realities. The revised estimates are based on the components of the GDP as reported currently, and also on historical figures. The medium-term nominal consumption is projected to 121.93% for 2023. Investment, especially from foreign sources, is expected to be dragged down by interest rate hikes in advanced economies, foreign exchange management concerns in Nigeria, and other domestic challenges, including insecurity. An overview of the 2023 to 2025 medium-term revenue framework. For oil and gas revenue and federally funded upstream projects for the reporting period, the projected fiscal outcomes in the medium term are presented under two scenarios, and we need inputs from this consultative forum on these two scenarios. So scenario one is a business as usual. This is assuming that the subsidy on PMS, which is estimated to be 6.7 trillion full year 2023, will remain and will be provided for. That is scenario one. That is, we don't remove fuel subsidy at all from January to December next year. Scenario two, on the other hand, is a scenario that we are calling reform scenario. This assumes that petroleum subsidy will remain up to mid-year 2023, that is June. And this is meeting in line with the commitment that we made when we made an adjustment to the current year budget to say that the first subsidy provision will be extended to 18 months. And this 18 months will be up to June of next year. In which case, only 3.36 trillion will be provided for in the 2023 medium-term framework. Additionally, there will be a tighter enforcement of performance management framework for government-owned enterprises that will significantly increase operating surplus and dividends remittances in 2023. And also the assumption is that in 2024 and 2025 that there will be no fuel subsidy expenditure for the Federation. So both scenarios have implications for net accretion of revenues to the Federation, as well as for the fiscal deficit that we report. And the table below, which I hope you will take time to look at, physically shows the impact of this. For example, total oil revenues for 2022 is 9.369 trillion. And for 2023, because of the reduced price that we assumed of $70 per barrel, it will go slightly down to 8.57 trillion in 2023. The deductions, that is the expenditure that the Federation bears, for 2022 is 4.15 trillion. And these deductions are, as listed below, include National Domestic Gas Development Project, Infrastructure Project, Frontier Exploration Project, Renewable Energy Development, Pipelines Project, PMS under recovery, as well as refinery rehabilitation, and some gas pipeline. This is 2022. But recall that just 2 days ago, that the president unveiled the new NNPC. And by the unveiling of the new NNPC, it means all of this upstream investments will be undertaken by the NNPC, the new NNPC Limited. But the Federation is expected to continue to bear the burden of fuel subsidy, even in the new arrangement. So the fuel subsidy cost to the Federation will be 6.715 trillion in scenario 1. That is the scenario that says that we will maintain fuel subsidy throughout 2023. In scenario 2, this is down by half because we're assuming down by half to 3.357 trillion because we're assuming that the subsidy will be ending as of June 2023. So the implication you can see for the net revenues is if we keep the fuel subsidy throughout 2022, compared to 4.57 trillion net revenues in 2022, in 2023, if we keep the subsidy, the net revenue will be 500 million. That is the implication. Moving from 4.539 trillion to 500 million. On the other hand, if we are able to end the subsidy by June of 2023, the revenue that will accrue to the Federation, and when I say Federation, it's federal government and states, will be 3.857 trillion. So that is the import of fuel subsidy. And then if you look at the outer year of 2024, where we assume no fuel subsidies at all, the revenue will now go up to 7.679 trillion with the same $70 per barrel crude. So ladies and gentlemen, your input is required in this regard. Let me just then very quickly move on to, so the scenarios I've already described and the expenditures that we expect in the medium-term framework are also shown on the tables. So vis-a-vis the budgets, the total revenues that we just projected, we're expecting that the federal government total expenditure, excluding government-owned enterprises, will be 15.3 trillion for 2023 under scenario 1 and 16.308 trillion under scenario 2. When you aggregate government-owned enterprises budget, this will move to 16.982 trillion and 17.989 trillion respectively. So, Honorable Minister, Permanent Secretaries, DGs, ladies and gentlemen, this is the 2023 to 2025 medium-term expenditure framework and fiscal strategy paper for public consultation. We look forward to your inputs. Thank you very much.
A round of applause for the Honorable Minister, Dr. Mrs. Zainab Ahmed. Now, sitting through her presentation, I couldn't help but note that systemic presentations anchored on facts are truths that you can take to the bank. She has done just that. And budgeting means we plan for the money that we have and not at the end asking, where did our money go? Please, a round of applause to her again. We will now take questions. Remember, keep it short, simple, brief, straight to the point. Let's know who you're directing your questions to. And for all our online participants, please send your questions to the chat room. We will read them. Keep them straight to the point. So who starts? All right. Please say your name and straight to the point.
Honorable Minister, good morning. You touched on one of the very key issues that I want to clarify.
Your name, please.
Okay, my name is Til Basi Udo. I am the team lead for Media TrackNet Nigeria.
Please, Mr. Basi, before you continue, please, when you send in your questions and you stand up, your name, your organization, and then straight to the point. You can continue, sir. Thank you.
Okay. Now, you touched the issue of the transition of the NNPC on Tuesday, the unveiling. But at the end of that event, we had an interaction with the group CEO of NNPC, who said that the implication of that transition means NMPC would not be contributing again to the Federation account committee, the monthly allocation that they used to contribute. And we know that NMPC is a very key member of that committee in terms of contributing to allocation monthly to the states. So I want to know how much of a challenge is NMPC's transition going to be for the funding of this framework that we are talking about. Then the second one has to do with the, prior to the transition of NMPC, we learned that NMPC was not contributing, remitting to the Federation account for almost 8 months. Correct me if I'm wrong. Now, what happens to that arrears now that NMPC have moved on? Is it gone with them, or is there any reconciliation process that the government is considering in that direction? Thank you.
Yes, please.
Honorable Minister, my name is Ima Uja. Good morning. I have two
Ima Uja from
Vanguard.
Thank you.
I have two questions. I'd like you to please give me the difference between the expenditure January to April, which you put at 4.72 trillion, and the actual revenue of that period. I ask this question to be able to know the difference. Thank you. Then secondly, you said that the NMPC will be funding operations upstream, but that the Federation will continue to bear the cost of subsidy. If up until now, or up until Tuesday, NMPC was the one funding the subsidy and was not remitting any money into the Federation account. Now NMPC has moved on, like my colleague said. How will you be able to fund this subsidy? Thank you very much.
Yes, please.
I am Benjamin Muteme from Blueprint Newspapers. Minister, I was just wondering, you said scenario 1, that Nigeria will still continue to pay subsidy up to the tune of over 6 trillion. So, and when you go to the states, petrol price is sold for over 200 naira per liter. And in Abuja here, we still try to bring it down, at least at the official rate. If in other states people are paying above the official price in Abuja here, what's the point still paying subsidy? If people in the states are not enjoying it, why are we? Is it only Abuja or Lagos that the subsidy is meant for? Please, I really need a clarification on that. Thank you.
On the side, on the swing, we should have questions on the swing. But let's go online. We have contributions online from Lawal Mohammed to all of us. He says, I'm a bit surprised that for the 2023 MTF, the ministry is still considering fuel subsidy. The earlier we get rid of the subsidy regime, the better for us. And also from Team Melaye, he says, indeed, without further delay, the subsidy regime needs to end, not in June 2023, but right now. We also have from Edward Nwakoro, he says, it's a question. Still the same question coming in. How will the Federation cater for the subsidy payment now that NMPC is a limited company? And also again from Lawal Mohammed, he says, however, if we are stuck with only these two scenarios, then we are better off taking scenario 2, where subsidies are paid for only 6 months of the year. I think we should take a break to allow the Honorable Minister respond to these questions and then come back to another batch of questions. The Honorable Minister.
Well, thank you very much, Basiudo, Mr. Imam from Vanguard, Benjamin, and also from the online participants. Let me just say that the new arrangement has indicated that NMPC will not be contributing monthly to the Federation as they used to in the past. But NMPC will be paying royalties, dividends, and taxes. So while the revenue might not be monthly, we will work out an arrangement with NMPC on how this will be paid. And it is possible to work out an arrangement where the payments could be monthly or quarterly for this same. It's not working. Move it. Can you hear me now? Okay, sorry. So I was just saying that the new arrangement requires that NMPC will not be contributing to FAC on a monthly basis. But NMPC will still be paying taxes, royalties, and dividends. And we will be engaging the NMPC on how we expect these inflows to come to the Federation. So we can negotiate that these remittances are done on a quarterly basis, for example. But let me also say that prior to the NMPC transiting, for yes, about 8 months, we have not been receiving any revenues from NMPC, and we have been coping as a federation. Why have we not been receiving any revenues from the federation? Because NMPC has been instructed to cover the cost of fuel subsidy on behalf of the federation. So NMPC is not paying the subsidy on its account, is on account of the Fed. So assuming they were not paying that subsidy value will have been remitted to the Federation. And this is the arrangement that we seek to continue in 2023. So it will still be a Federation expenditure, but it will be undertaken by NMPC as a supplier of last resort. And we see a situation where maybe with the coming on stream of new refineries, that other marketers will begin to find the PMS retail market attractive enough to invest in buying fuel themselves and selling to the Nigerian market. And that's why it's important for us to consider this issue of removal of fuel subsidy very, very seriously. Because no marketer is willing to buy PMS after sourcing their foreign exchange and come and sell it at control price. It can only be a government agency, and in this case, NMPC, on the instruction of the Federation. Mr. Mann from Vanguard was asking what is the difference between the actual revenue and, actual expenditure to the actual revenue. So the difference is 3.09 trillion, and that means it's a deficit that we have had to finance by borrowing. That's the difference. And why are we having this difference? Because we're carrying a huge subsidy cost. That's why we're having this kind of gap. And also, you asked whether NMPC will fund because NMPC will now fund its upstream investments, that whether the funding of fuel subsidy will also be funded by, and I explained that NMPC has been funding fuel subsidy, but they're doing it on behalf of the Federation, so it's on the cost of the Federation. Even though they're the ones undertaking it, we are paying them for it. So when they generate revenue, instead of remitting the revenue, they're using part of the revenue or all of the revenue to fund fuel subsidy. That has been the arrangement, and that is what will continue to be in place until we exit the fuel subsidy as a nation. Benjamin from Blueprint also asked whether the 2023 scenario one, whether the states are paying, why as a citizen you go to a state or even in the outskirts of Abuja and pay higher pump price, when in Abuja and Lagos you're paying control price. Again, that is the economics of fuel subsidy. In reality, majority of Nigerians are not actually paying that official pump price. So it's the economics of fuel subsidy, and as a nation, we have to consider what makes sense for the majority of the people. And it doesn't lie with, the decision doesn't lie with the Ministry of Finance alone. On the questions from the online audience are all about why don't we remove this fuel subsidy? That's what I hear from the 3 questions that the moderator read online. Why don't we remove this fuel subsidy? The answer lies with Nigerians. Hichem, do you want to add anything?
Thank you. I would really like to speak on the issue of scenario 1, where I think it was Benjamin who did say that in Abuja, PMS is selling at 165, and that in other states, it's selling about 200. Even at 200, there's still a huge subsidy because the cost of production of PMS itself is in the neighborhood of about 600 to 700 naira per liter. Right now, Nigeria is the only country in the world that is selling at about 165 or 200. If you call your friends or brothers in the States or in Europe or in other African countries, you will know that PMS is currently being sold at a range of between 800 to 1,000 naira per liter. I think that the time to remove the subsidy was yesterday. We are only eating away our future. And that is what some people call consumption economy. I find it difficult to understand a situation where citizens say that they want homelet. And then when the government wants to break eggs so that they can produce omelet, they say, no, don't break the eggs. So it's a decision that Nigerians will have to take. Because if you look at scenario 1, it means that we will not have any capital expenditure next year. Yeah. There will be no capital expenditure at all, and taking care of recurrent expenditure will be a huge challenge. With scenario 2, where we say let's take it up to June, it means we will only have about 1 trillion,
3.3 trillion.
yeah, left for capital expenditure. And when you look at our budgets over the years, we have tried to ensure that the minimum capital that we spend is about 30% of the budget. But this doesn't live or meets up to that expectation. So the answer to this really lies in what the citizens want. Unfortunately, all those who agree with us in-house that we should remove the subsidy, all the political parties, the governors in the country, the labor unions, NLC, TLC, or TUC, when they come out to the public, they will say, don't remove the subsidy. But behind the scene, they see the books, they understand that it has to be done. But maybe out of lack of patriotism or in order to promote themselves or their parties, they say it's the government that wants to punish the people. So Nigerians really need to decide, because if we must have a future, then subsidy needs to go now. Thank you.
Sir, we shall take the next batch of questions. Do I have a go-ahead, ma'am? Thank you. Next batch of questions, please. Yes, sir. Straight to the point, your name, the organization, and your question.
Good morning, Honorable Minister. My name is Isa Abdul Wahab. I report for New Telegraph newspapers. In terms of ramping revenue from revenue generating agencies, what is being done by federal government to ensure that MDAs remit their operating surplus? Because Fiscal and Consultative Commission are having a difficult challenge with the MDAs in terms of revenue to Federation accounts.
Okay. Next. All right, from the swing.
Okay, I'm Isa Mustafa from ELIP Initiative, Jigawa State. ELIP Initiative, Jigawa State.
All right.
This issue has been projected about 5 years ago. The Honorable Minister and DG Budget can vividly recall. We are foreseeing this kind of issues and scenarios, and we have been advocating to look at our macroeconomic assumptions vis-a-vis our budget realism. However, we keep on saying and insisting that we need to borrow, we need to continue borrowing for us to develop. And always basing our argument based on our GDP ratio and what have you. However, looking at the critical appraisal of our budget component, you may see a lot of frivolous expenditures and what have you. But we also insisted on providing some argument that all these expenditures, all these allocations, they are viable. How comes you can see in a federal budget some project that they don't have any traction to broader economic development? So I think if you look at the budget critically, there's a lot of expenditures that they are not federal government specific. So there's a lot of policy somersault in the budget. There's a lot of confusion and duplication of projects. So I think we need to also revisit our budget proposals and estimate. That's number one. Number two, when this government come into power, they promised Nigerians that they are going to revitalize the NNPC. They are going to start producing. Where are we today? So I think all these things we have already told you during this kind of consultative forum, but it's just become a mere screen and a jamboree. You invite us, we give you our input, and you went out to do what you feel is good for the country. Unfortunately, here we are. All the promises you have made, none of them you have achieved. And you are now telling Nigerians that the best way is to remove the subsidy. What about all the promises you made? None of the refineries is working. And now you are telling the Nigerians that we have to bear it. Otherwise, we have told you this time before that in the next couple of years, we didn't have a penny for us to implement a capital projects. And so you should borrow, and continue borrowing. So I think you need to revisit your macroeconomic assumption. You need to look at the MDS budget proposals so that we can be at the right track. Thank you.
Thank you very much. But please, could we have a bit of clarity? We had agreed collectively as Nigerians to have respect for those online too, because data is live. Please coalesce your idea, keep it short and simple. Short, simple, and very brief. Be direct. And please remember to point out who you are addressing it to. Keep it short, simple, and very brief. Next. All right, sir.
All right, thank you very much, Madam Minister. My name is Mark Isibo from Leadership Newspapers. I just want to first of all say that the modalities with NNPC on how they are going to be remitting or what they are going to be remitting is ought to be done before now, even before the privatization, so that at least by today we'll be saying this is how they are going to be paying what they will be paying. But it's never late. You talked about the issue of investment going to be dragged down, the possibility of investment going to be dragged, obviously, because of insecurity majorly. I am not oblivious of the fact that you are not the defense minister, but I just want to still ask you, because you have the channel to push it further. What is the federal government doing about the insecurity that is now affecting? Because we are talking about revenue. If we have investments, if we have a very attractive business climate, the revenues will come. And again, I want to ask, talking about revenue generation, what is the federal government doing about sugar tax initiative? Because we are talking about raising revenue to see how we can reduce our borrowing spree. What is the federal, when is this going to take effect? If it are taking effect, what is the extent, please? Thank you.
All right, next. I'd like to take one more from here so I have a balance. Do we have another hand here right now? If we don't, then we move over to you, sir. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. My question is, my name is Ibrahim Samaila from Agama Center for Peace and Development in Nasarawa State. My question is, we are talking about removing the fuel subsidy, and most of our citizens at the grassroots don't understand the politics of removing the fuel subsidy. What is the federal government doing to sensitize the people at the grassroots for them to be in line with the thinking of federal government? That is number one. Number two, immediately there is removal of subsidy. You discover that inflation all over the country, around the transport sector, in our markets, all over the sectors, things change at once. What are your plans to control this inflation rate that will hit the masses hardly if this subsidy is being removed? Thank you very much.
The Honorable Minister will now respond because we have quite a number of questions coming from online, and after your response, we now go online. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let me just start by making a statement that NNPC has not been privatized. NNPC is owned by the Federation 100%. Ministry of Finance and Ministry of Petroleum Resources are the two shareholders of NNPC. So it's still a government-owned enterprise. It's not privatized. Then to Mr. Isa Abdullahi of Telegraph, you were asking what are we doing for MDAs to remit their operating surplus? What are we doing about that? I'll invite the DG budget to provide some light on that. And also Musa Mustafa from Jigawa, long narrative, but I didn't get anything specific other than your recommendations in the past have not been taken into account. But what recommendations are you making? We said this is a consultation. We want to take specific inputs to improve on what we have presented as our own thinking. So I really didn't gather anything from you at all, other than the things that we have had over and over again. We'll appreciate specific inputs from you. You said review the MDA's budget. We have been reviewing budgets to the extent that we have one of the highest ratings now of Transparency Index. We have also been saying that when we do our budgets change in the form in which they come out from the National Assembly. So we do our own part as a fiscal authority, but it's not the executive that prepares the Appropriation Act. It is the National Assembly. And whatever passes as a law, we have an obligation to implement. We agree that there are some programs and projects in our budget that should even be done by local governments or by states. But we have opened up our books to enable citizens to have information to hold government to account. That's the purpose of the effort we have been doing to be transparent in our budget. If you look at the budget office, or any budget you are looking for, you see the details. The Treasury portal of the Accountant General has the details of the expenditure. It is for citizens to use that information to ask informed questions so that there is a push for improvement. So please, we will appreciate your specific inputs. If you have anything very peculiar that you think we should look at, please give us that information. Mark from Leadership, modalities with the NNPC have not been done before. We have been discussing, there's a transition committee, we are members of the committee, but the landing on how remittances will be formed is still subject to 1 or 2 more meetings that we'll hold with NNPC and also with the Federation Account Committee. So it's almost done. And obviously, we have said investments will not come into Nigeria as long as there is a perception of increased insecurity. So it means we have had to prioritize spending for security. And we have seen improvements in security. It improves in one side and then it breaks out in another. But Mr. President and the security agencies are continuously looking at how we can make improvements in the security space. Our role as a fiscal authority is to make sure that the security agencies are resourced to be able to undertake the role of securing our nation. Ibrahim Samaila, also on the sugar tax, we've started the implementation of the sugar tax. There's a regulation following the Finance Act 2021 that has been released. The Nigerian Customs Service, as it is, has deployed and assigned their staff to companies that are producing, we call it carbonated drinks. So this is what you are calling sugar tax. So the excise duties, are, as we speak, are being collected on carbonated drinks. And this took effect from June 2021. Ibrahim Samaila from Nasarawa says most citizens don't understand the politics of fuel subsidy. And we agree with you. And anytime there's fuel subsidy removal, there's a group that don't want this to be removed, and they cause citizens to come out and protest against it. The fact is, if you remove any subsidy anywhere in the world, the initial import of it is that there will be push in inflation. But if you actually bear the storm, it moderates and it comes down. There will always be that. So it's like saying you have somebody who has had an accident and they goes into an emergency room. The first thing you want to do is to stabilize the person if he's bleeding. It's not to find out whether he's hypertensive or diabetic or something. So there will be that crisis when you remove any subsidy. But if you allow it to go on for a while, that situation will stabilize and subside. And it's a pain that as citizens and as a nation we have to be prepared to go through so that we get rid of this burden once and for all. I want to now hand over to my colleague or DG. First the HMS and then the DG budget.
Just to re-emphasize some of the things that you have said, especially in reference to what Mustafa from Jigawa said. As citizens and as journalists, as civil society organizations, when we want to say that something is not right, we should be specific on who is not doing that right thing. We have 3 arms of government, and there are also 3 tiers of government. You have the federal, the state, and the local government. They are government. You have the executive, you have the legislature, and then you have judiciary. They are also government. But if it rains in my village and a roof goes off, you say government hasn't done what it's supposed to do. Or if there's no road to my village, we say the government didn't provide road. But which government? If we are not specific as to who's responsible for any action or inaction, nothing will be done. Because everybody's business is nobody's business. Just like HM said, we, from the executive side, we look at the needs and we prepare an appropriation which Mr. President forwards to the National Assembly. Whatever comes back from the National Assembly is what we will implement. If citizens know that members of the National Assembly are supposed to be lawmakers, and then they continue to put pressure on the lawmakers to say, we need the hospital in my village, we need the road, you have not done this, you have not done that. Citizens are changing the rules of members of the National Assembly to go away from making laws, but executing projects. And that's the crux of the matter. And I think that needs to change. And then oftentimes I hear that we talk about borrowing. Is borrowing a bad thing? No, it's not. It depends on what you are borrowing for. If you are borrowing for consumption, then it is bad. But if you are borrowing for production, it is good. Especially for us journalists, I think that when things are done that are positive, it is important that we highlight them. Only recently we launched the National Integrated Infrastructure Master Plan, where we said over the years, there have been a huge deficit in infrastructure in the country. And that will require about 2.3 trillion in 23 years to be able to cover the gap. And of this, we need about $150 billion a year for at least the first 10 years to be able to catch up. This government has done a lot in terms of infrastructure, but no one reports it. We're only interested in the negative news. And that's what the people get to know. Subsidies that we fight for, who really is enjoying the subsidy? The very vulnerable ones in the villages, who are about 60% of our population, don't benefit from subsidy. Those who do benefit from subsidies are the large companies, the corporations, who have hundreds of vehicles. The ExxonMobil, the Shell, the Chevron, Total, and all those of us who drive vehicles of very high capacity. We are the ones enjoying subsidy. Yet, when subsidy wants to be removed, this same set of people who have the resources are the ones who go to the vulnerable ones, hire musicians, give them food, and ask them to protest against what is bad for them. Diesel has since been deregulated. And that's the one for me that maybe people should have been more concerned, because the transportation of food and others is through that means. But it's been stabilized. Other countries of the world, they pay the right price. And once you have something for free, you don't value it. Salvation, for instance, is free. Nobody thinks about it. Nobody values it until you are in danger. When you are in that plane and it begins to vibrate, you suddenly remember God. Salvation becomes important. You go to our villages, you go to most homes, power is always on, the light is on, because we are not paying the right price for it. But you leave Nigeria and you go to Europe, you ensure that you switch off the lights in every room in the house. No AC is on if you are not there. But here we put it on and go to work. I think that as a country and as a people, we require a lot of mindset change. We're always pointing fingers, but the speck is really in our eyes, and we need to have it removed. Thank you.
DG Budget.
Thank you. I think there were two matters that the Honourable Minister referred specifically to me. One has to do with the question regarding GOEs. What are we doing to make them do better in terms of the remittances, of operating surpluses and dividends to the government's, the Consolidated Revenue Fund. Quite a number of measures have been taken. First of all, you note that the budgets of the government-owned enterprises that we call GOEs for short, in some countries they use SOEs, that's state-owned enterprises, didn't used to be part of the federal government's budget. They were not consolidated with the federal government's budget. Indeed, some of them didn't used to prepare annual budgets, or certainly not on a timely basis. The rules guiding their budget preparation were all over the place. What we've done, one, is to enthrone stricter budgetary discipline over the GOEs, which ensures that they prepare their budgets on a timely basis, guided by rules, signed off by the Honourable Minister, and that their budgets are submitted by the president to the National Assembly alongside the government's own budget. So in the federal government's budget, we now integrate their, their budgets into the federal government's own budget. There's in 2018, a new performance management framework was also issued to guide, the fiscal, accountability of these GOEs, which, in instance, enforces timely audits them, empowers the Office of the Accountant General of the Federation to go straight into their TSA accounts and deduct, funds that are due to be remitted to the Federation account, to the Consultative Revenue Fund that they have not, that they have failed, to do. The Finance Act 2020 also imposed a cost-to-income ratio, because what we found was that many of those GOEs, they're generating a lot of revenues, but also spending and filtering it out and frittering it away. And even though the law required them to remit operating surplus, at the end of the day, the surplus is the difference between your revenue and your expenditure. So if there is no control over your expenditure, the surplus will simply be a tiny amount. So by law now, government has imposed a 50% ceiling on their expenditure, their cost-to-income ratio too. So the culmination of all of this, of course, the National Assembly has also worked very collaboratively with us on this, the Finance and other oversight committees of the National Assembly. The cumulative impact is that from about 200 million naira that they used to remit as of 2016. In fact, 2016, when they remitted 200 million, was a significant jump from what they used to do. By last year, we were getting 1.2 trillion naira from these, GOEs. We believe that it's a work in progress in terms of getting them. We think that the potential there is still, higher than that. With respect to the, Isa Mustafa's comment, one of his issues was that we had insisted in the past, contrary to suggestions by people like him, that we should stop borrowing. We've insisted on borrowing, but now the impact, the borrowings don't seem to have had the desired impact that we projected, and instead have put us in a bind. A couple of points to make. One is, over this period, we have been through 2 recessions. Each of those recessions for Nigeria was a V-shaped recession, which means we got into recession and got right back out. The truth is that without the expansionary fiscal stance, which was only made possible given the weak revenue performance by the borrowings, it will not have been possible for the country to emerge that quickly from recession. And when the economy remains in recession for long, it impacts, adversely on its economic fortunes in a wider, dimension. So that's, a fact. Unfortunately, without these, perhaps we'll have been seeing the benefits, of some of those. The second thing is that the infrastructure projects, which take a long time to conclude, and for which you are borrowing, until they're actually completed and, put to use over time, you will not begin to see the impact of those investments. But the point remains that in the long term, it would, it will yield the desired result. What is a valid comment is that side by side, that we also need to be putting stronger drive on the revenue side. And the truth is, we've made some effort, but again, a recession is not the best of time to drive revenues, because classical economic thinking is during a recession is not the time to increase taxes, is not the time to taxes, and so that has constrained to move more forcefully in that direction. For instance, our VAT, even though we've managed to move the VAT rate from 5 to 7.5%, at 7.5%, our VAT rate is still less than half of the African average of VAT rate. All around us, VAT rates, there's no one with VAT rate less than 15%. So, but we have, been restrained in using, taxes as a way of driving revenues, preferring instead to focus on expansion of our tax base to get everyone to pay their fair share of taxes, and that includes individuals and businesses. And this has been extremely challenging. But well, people generally don't like to pay taxes unless they are compelled to, and so it's not surprising. But what you see now is the FIRS is forging ahead, using a lot of technology to make sure that people actually pay taxes. Ultimately, that is what is going to, on a sustainable basis, finance government operations and ensure that we do not have to resort to borrowing. Thank you.
Kind permission, Honorable Minister, I'll take this batch of questions. Okay. From the online participants. Okay. Okay, ma'am.
We actually have a shareholders meeting that is waiting for me.
Okay, ma'am.
Just to say that what we have been doing was to borrow to roll out capital projects. And these capital projects are not hidden. They are quite visible. And I'll give you some examples. So we have the Lagos-Ibadan Expressway. We have the 4 airports, international airports at Lagos, Abuja, Port Harcourt, and Kano. We also have rail lines that have been built, some completed and already put to use, and there are others that are work in progress as we speak. We have road projects across the 6 geopolitical zones in the country. There's no state that doesn't have a major road project that is ongoing. For some of the road projects, we took the borrowing option of using Sukuk, which is really an investment instrument where citizens provide their money for you to build specific roads. These Sukuk roads are visible. They are also across every state in the federation. So far, under the Sukuk, we have about 48 major roads across the country that are being funded by Sukuk. We've done 4 circles of Sukuk so far, and they have proven to be a success. Every time we release a Sukuk, we get almost 300% oversubscription because people, Nigerians, have shown interest in that mode of funding infrastructure facility. So there's a lot of work that has been done in terms of infrastructure from east to west, north to the south. It's only if we sit back and remember that these major infrastructure projects are being done at a time under an administration that has had the worst hit factors in terms of revenue. Prior to 2015, we have witnessed oil prices that are as high as 120, but an average of $100 per barrel of crude oil, with productions that is as high as 1.8 million barrels per day. So, so at some point it went to 2.3 million. But at those times, the infrastructure that have been built are not up to one quota of what we're doing now. And these are at times when we have witnessed 2 recessions that DG Budget said we were able to exit quickly because we decided to borrow to exit the recession instead of allowing the recession to lead us to a state of stagflation. So, as my colleague said earlier on, while as citizens and as press, we need to say the things that are not working well, but it's also important to balance what we say with the things that have worked, so that the citizens that depend on the information that you provide will have balanced information. Have we done all the right things? No. Have we done the best that could be done? No. But we have done the best that we can under very, very tight circumstances, under very stringent circumstances. And we will continue to do our best for the benefit of the citizens. I'd like to ask an appeal to be excused. I have a Bank of Agriculture shareholder meeting that has been waiting, and I'd like to hand over to my colleague, the Honorable Minister of State, to continue with this program.
Honorable Minister, a round of applause. I think she has justified what she has presented. We can do better. There are plenty hands in this room. Thank you, our Honorable Minister. You are, okay, ma'am.
Okay, permit me to please stand on existing protocols. I just want to make some further clarifications, even though we have done that at sessions like this previously, as well as at other sessions that we have with the citizens on public debt. I wanted to highlight a few things. I think one of the things that has been coming out, so we're always talking about debt stock growing and debt service going, but one of the things we can see very clearly in the 2023 projection, for instance, is that even the figure for subsidy is even higher than debt service. Okay, so if we borrow to finance infrastructure, at least we can see them. We try to say we are not seeing them, but we can see them. They are physical, they are visible. We see those projects. But now we're going to, for 2023, if that is the option that is finally approved, the budget for subsidy, which I should say doesn't benefit the majority of Nigerians, is actually higher than debt service. So I think these are things that should compel those of us here to begin to ask ourselves questions and to decide which are the issues we should be focusing on. Should we keep talking about retention of subsidy, given that it is taking away so much from us? I had wanted to talk also about the fact that, just speaking to our friend from Jigawa State, we cannot deny the fact that there has been an improvement in infrastructure. So let's move a bit away from saying government has not done anything about infrastructure. We certainly can see a lot of infrastructure across the country without trying to repeat what the minister has said. Then the issue around revenues, I take the point of DG budget that there's so much you can do about revenue during a recession. But when you look at the World Bank data, so I'm saying World Bank data because at least this can be relied upon, they have been vetted and gone through several checks. You can see that the revenue to GDP ratio of Nigeria is among the lowest in the world, and we keep highlighting this even in a period of recession. So data from the World Bank show that in 2020, out of about 196 countries covered in the IMF, in the World Bank's economic outlook, Nigeria was 194 in terms of revenue to GDP. So something is wrong. We can't keep saying, size of budget one is low, debt service to revenue is high, debt stock to GDP of those countries are high, but debt service for those countries are low because they have revenues. And I think revenues are the collective responsibility of Nigeria. We can't stop talking about revenues. What is the government doing? But I think individually we all have responsibilities for revenue. So our revenue to GDP as a country is extremely low. And the reality is that in the medium to long term, countries survive on revenues where they have enough and borrowing that is required, but you can't survive continuously on borrowing and expect to have infrastructure and all of the other good services that we expect. So let's also talk, I think from this process of the budgeting, some people ask, just let me use this opportunity to clarify, why is the debt stock growing? You can see it from the presentations that we've been having for several years. When the budget is drawn up, it is drawn up from the budget. There's revenue, there's expenditure, then there's a gap that is funded by borrowing. It doesn't just happen, accidentally or without any approvals. That's one. But having said that, what are we even doing to ensure that even if we have to borrow, the debt service cost can be moderated? Over 60% of our external debt is actually from concessional sources. So we're talking of costs below that are at most 3% and are spread out over a long period. If we didn't have those strategies in place, the debt service will actually be higher. Okay, so there's a lot going in terms of managing the debt service, managing the debt stock also in composition. So while people talk about debt stock is growing, a lot of it is actually long tenured, both the external and the domestic, and they are not all due now. We would like to see more revenue so that the debt service to revenue ratio is high, but perhaps there are suggestions from such fora on what it is we can do. I thought we should highlight that so that we are not talking generally, but today, for instance, just looking at the figures, that the figure for subsidy is higher than debt service, further highlights the need to do something about subsidy. And let me take it that the price we have even used in determining that subsidy is low. The oil price may actually be higher than that. We don't know. So let's keep those in mind. Thank you.
The Honorable Minister of State, sir, may I proceed with the next batch of questions? And we're going to the online participants. This is coming from Bemisola Joel Oshoba. And the question is, beyond 2022, how will the federal government fund subsidy, given its new private entity? I don't think the debt is an option, given that debt service to revenue ratio is above the target level. Now, what are the initiatives government is taking to ensure public support for debt removal? The second question is coming from Damian Mary Adeleke of the Civil Society Action Coalition on Education for All. And it says, you projected increase in the production of oil. What projection is made to ensure facilities are in place to increase these production? 2, on inflation, are we projecting that there is no way we can stabilize the economy and bring down inflation? Because the presentation says inflation is projected to increase to 17%. Our next question and contribution is from S.K. Abubakar. And it reads, the public needs to be sensitized on the disadvantage of continuous extension of the fuel subsidy. Sensitization on the disadvantage of extending the fuel subsidy period. Bwemishola Oshoba again says, does this mean instead of paying royalties to the Federation, it will be used to pay subsidy if not removed? And then, okay. And Bwemishola again says, does this mean instead of paying royalties to the Federation, it will be used to pay subsidy if not removed? From Lawal Mohammed, I read, the key assumption on inflation and foreign exchange seem not to be in tune with current realities. As of today, our headline inflation is at over 18.5%, while the parallel market rate is over 600 to a US dollar. Damon Mary again says, if the NMPC can be instructed to cover for subsidy, is it not also possible to speak the companies that ply our roads with heavy vehicles to maintain the roads instead of paying to the federal government? Omeza Michael says, I will suggest that revenues made by NMPC be paid to the government account and then payments for subsidy be made from the Federation account. Ibrahim Abdul Karim Yahya says, Honorable Minister, subsidy for now is a disaster and immediate removal is the only way for now. Bwemishola is back with another question for the minister and asks, given that the debt service to revenue ratio is above the target level, acquiring more debt seems impractical. What are the alternatives to boost domestic revenue? Solomon Ahimen says, Honorable Minister, just to follow up on your clarifications on why NMPC is the only one paying subsidy on behalf of the Federation, my question is, does that mean the subsidy payment is in excess of revenue generated? Because that should account for why NMPC has remitted zero amount to the Federation account. Rotimi Oyelere says, in view of the Dangote refinery expected to come on stream later this year, subsidy bill on PMS should reduce drastically. I am wondering if this reality is captured in the assumptions to these scenarios. Obviously, we must need a practicable timetable for the subsidy removal because we cannot keep talking about this rhetoric. The federal government should tell us how and set practicable timetable. Chinyere Onoha says, my question, Honorable Minister, given this inflation rate and possible increase in fuel, what is the federal government's plan for the populace with regards to minimum wage and the socioeconomic status of the average Nigerian to survive? And finally, for now, Mary Ikoku asks and says, it is important to remove completely this subsidy. However, my major concern about subsidy removal is corresponding strategic public communication. Will the government be willing to ensure that there is adequate communication attention paid to the entire process of subsidy removal? A lot of government programs fail for lack of adequate communication attention being paid to them. Citizens don't know enough to support the government. You need citizens to buy in, and that can only be achieved when you have communicated effectively to the citizens. Communication is critical to the success of such projects and programs of government, and this must be paid serious attention to if we have to get it right. All relevant publics must have good understanding of all the issues. Communicate, 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 and let it be strategic. Honorable Minister, I hand over to you.
There are several questions running back to back, and then you were also very fast in reeling out the questions. But I think that 80% of the questions that were asked seem to deal on the issue of subsidy. And in the earlier responses that were given, this had been dealt with. The issue of adequate communication, of course, that has to be worked upon because citizens need to understand. And the issue on around minimum wage, we are saying that we are not having enough revenue, and it is because we are not having enough revenue that we are having to borrow. Do you borrow to pay salaries? And so if you are increasing the minimum wage, we are also saying go borrow to pay more salaries. This country belongs to all of us. Sacrifices that need to be made. Dangote refinery is a private establishment. Even if government refineries were working, the pricing of product is set based on the cost of production. And one of the components of cost of production is the cost of crude oil itself. And the cost of crude oil is not just fixed by a country. It is fixed by a collective. So if NMPC refineries were to be working, we will look at that what cost of crude oil, the production, that's the refinery cost, before you look at the price. So it doesn't mean that because Dangote refinery is in Nigeria, therefore, he will sell his product for 165 naira per liter. He's going to consider his cost of production. What we lose in our refineries really not working here. It's about 8 naira per liter, which is the logistics cost of bringing it into the country. Like I said earlier, the average cost of production now of PMS is around 700, 800 naira per liter across the world, not just in Nigeria. It says beyond 2022, how will federal government be funding a subsidy? And I think that has been answered by the vast majority of Nigerians who have also asked questions here today or made comments. They say, remove the subsidy now. I don't think we should continue with it because it is indeed killing the country. For the rest of the other questions as they come in online, we would get the team to provide responses. I think we should now proceed. You want to? Okay. After DG, we'll just proceed with the program so we can round up. We have other activities set out for the day. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Honourable Minister. Just again for clarity, some of the questions that were asked surrounding this subsidy payment. Someone asked if it was not removed, would NMPC then be able to apply all revenues, including royalties, towards that payment? The answer is yes. And someone asked, does it mean that in the January to April period, the subsidy payments have exceeded the revenues generated by NMPC? Again, that's correct. That's why it's consumed all of the revenues and they've been unable to remit anything. And that is also actually because during the period January to April, the average daily production of crude for Nigeria was 1.3 million barrels per day. The budget for 2022 was originally based on 1.86 million barrels per day. Earlier in the year, when we noticed that there were challenges, that was revised down to 1.6 million barrels. But in the January to April period, production was down 300,000 barrels per day. So, vis-a-vis, budget. And that's because of the oil theft and the vandalization of pipelines in the Niger Delta area. So this, you can imagine if we were pumping an additional spotting an additional 300,000 barrels of crude oil per day, what that will have meant for government revenues during the period. And better still, if we were able to meet our OPEC quota is currently approximately 1.8 million barrels. So we're about 500,000 barrels short of our OPEC quota, even though in country the capacity to produce even more than our OPEC quota exists. So imagine an additional 500,000 barrels per day and the revenues that come from it. So, that is a problem that, also must be, be fixed, arresting the oil theft and the pipeline vandalization. And that's a job for the security agencies. Someone said, why doesn't NMPC pay in all the revenues into the account and then that is the ideal thing, and that's strictly what the Constitution requires. And that's how it used to be in the past. But the net effect was that when the gross revenues went into the Federation account, the practical, challenges with government expenditure, the process meant that oftentimes NMPC was then not able to meet its obligations to, its, contracting partners on a timely basis. And so they were granted the dispensation to be able to deduct upfront the money, what they're required to spend before remitting the net amount to the Federation account. But again, the Honourable Minister spoke about the engagements currently, about how the new NNPC post PIA will operate. And these are all some of the matters that will that are under, discussion. Thank you.
Any other inputs, please, from the table of responsibility? Not at all. With the kind permission of the Honorable Minister of State, permit me invite you to come over for the closing remark. Please join me welcome with a round of applause, Prince Clem Agba.
I know the Master of Ceremony has said I should do some closing remarks, but I would like to do two things. Closing remarks and vote of thanks, because we're already behind fellow Nigerians. I think that we have had a very exciting morning. In line with the promise of this government, that there would be transparency in all that we do, and that we would carry Nigerians along. That there should be inclusiveness, there should be participation in all that we do. We have again, as part of our budget transparency process, spoken to you this morning. We will be taking further engagement again with the Governors Forum. We had attempted to do that yesterday, but unfortunately a quorum wasn't formed. But hopefully by Tuesday, we will continue with this consultation before we go to the Federal Executive Council and then the National Assembly. Like the DG Budget said in his welcome remarks, our rating in terms of budget transparency is continuing to improve, and that is very good for our country. As part of our transparency, we have recently received an award in the beneficial ownership space, recognized by the Open Government Partnership. And to deepen that, only last week, Mr. President also approved Nigerians' membership of the Beneficial Ownership Leadership Forum. And that is in furtherance of the fight against corruption, fight against illicit financial flows. Because what this means is that with the CAC working on the Beneficial Ownership Register, we can now integrate our register with the rest of the world, so that Europe and America would also have their books open to us. Nigerians who have businesses in those places, we will be able to know them, see what is going on, and the fund movement that is taking place. A lot has been said today about the budget and the issues around recession that we have had, 2016, 2020, and how the measures that were put in place by government, so in 2016 it was the Economic Recovery and Growth Plan, 2017 to 2020 that was put in place, that took us out of that recession. With COVID-19, we put in place the Economic Sustainability Plan. Again, we quickly were able to get out of recession. Both recessions were V-shaped, not U-shaped. And one of the reasons that happened is because we were able to reflate the economy quickly. And doing that, we had to get external resources, that is borrowing, to take care of it. The issue of infrastructure. The Honorable Minister spoke around this, and she mentioned a couple of projects. But I'd like to add to the list that she already mentioned. This government has completed the second longest bridge in the country, which is the Obeto Bridge. This bridge is connecting the northeast to the southeast across River Benue. And this is going to cut off about 6 hours of travel that's been going on. The bridge is awaiting commissioning by Mr. President. The second Niger bridge has now been connected end-to-end between Delta and Anambra. And you agree with me that for over 15 years, we've been hearing about the second Niger bridge, but we have not then been able to see anything. But now you can see it, you can touch it, and you can feel it. What is now left is the furnishing of the bridge itself. And by the special grace of God, it's projected that by the last quarter of this year, that bridge will be complete. Same thing too with the Bodo Bridge that is going on in Rivers State, connecting the Bonny Island, and also the Kaduna-Kano Expressway. The government, with its limited resources, will continue to focus a lot of energy in bringing in infrastructure. I know that from one of the presidential aspirants, we have heard that infrastructure is not important, doesn't really mean anything. But you agree with me that that is, if we are not dealing with our infrastructure, we are only preparing to sign our obituary. Having said that, let me use this opportunity to thank each and every one of you that are here present and joining us online that have made it possible for us to have this engagement. We promise you that we will continue to engage depending on what issues that the government will have before decisions are taken. And it's now in our character to do this. But it's not often that I have opportunity like this to speak to Nigerians. And one of the things that we keep talking about is the issue of implementation of our budget and the issue of monitoring and evaluation of those budgets. Like you know, usually we have over 30 to 40,000 projects in our national budget. And the two units or departments that we have, which is the M&E department in the Budget and National Planning and the M&E unit in the Budget Office, all put together about 50 personnel. And 50 personnel monitoring 30 to 40,000 projects in a year is a huge task. So what we have decided to do is to use citizens to monitor and evaluate our projects, especially the fiscal projects. And one way we have sought to do this is the use of technology. So the ministry has designed a web application, which we have christened the iMac. I encourage all Nigerians to register to the iMac. It's free. Do iMac.ng. You will see it. It's live. You can download it on your phones and use it to help monitor our projects. We believe that it is easier for over 200 million Nigerians to monitor 30,000 projects than for 50 Nigerians to monitor those 30,000 projects. The app uses geospatial technology. So if you go to a project and you using that app and you take a picture of that project, it's going to come to us geotagged with the latitude and the longitude. And so we are able to say specifically, this is the project. So with this, and if Nigerians use it, never again will someone build a wooden bridge and call it a world-class bridge. Or never again will nothing happen. You have a forest and then you are told that an expressway has been built. But we require Nigerians to use it. We require Nigerians to participate, because when we say government, it is all of us. It is not just one section and then leaving the other. So thank you very much for coming. I wish you all a safe journey back to your respective destinations. For those who are here physically and those who have joined us virtually, we thank you for attending. God bless you all. God bless the Federal Republic of Nigeria.
Thank you so very much. Please, a round of applause for the Honorable Minister of State. Once again, riding on the vote of thanks of the Honorable Minister of State, permit me to thank the Honorable Minister of Finance in absentia, Dr. Mrs. Zainab Ahmed, the Honorable Minister of State, Prince Clem Agba, and the Permanent Secretary, Finance, Mr. Aliyu Ahmed, also the Permanent Secretary, Special Duties, Ahmed Chinkafi. Special thanks to the Director General Budget Office, Mr. Ben Akabweze. Also, thank you to the Director General Debt Management Office, Mrs. Patience Oniha. Thank you to the Director General, Nigeria Institute of Social and Economic Research, Professor Simbine. Thank you so very much. Remember, you can still contribute by going on to www.budgetoffice.gov.ng. Once again, it's www.budgetoffice.gov.ng. Remember to use the iMac.ng too to monitor projects in your area. Shall we all rise for the national anthem? I still crave our indulgence to remain standing as we allow members of the table of responsibility take their leave. My name is Glory Ohago. I talk for Voice of Nigeria. Remember, the budget will succeed with your input and my input. Always put Nigeria first, and have a pleasant day.